This video is going to demonstrate how we use gouache watercolor paint in this class. So I have our three primaries laid out here. I've got our blue, our yellow, our red. Let's talk a little bit about the characteristics of gouache watercolor. So gouache is very similar to traditional watercolor. They can be used very interchangeably. Traditional watercolor tends to be worked very transparently and layered. You can also do that with these gouache paints. For the purpose of our class, we're going to be using them in a more opaque matte way. The reason we use gouache in the class is because it can give you a very precise display of color because it's very matte, it's very opaque, and it doesn't interfere with brush strokes and or the color of the paper. So I'm going to show you how to use it effectively in this video. Let's start with the couple things that we need. So obviously you need some paint. I have a couple of brushes here, mainly flat brushes, and then one that's more of a pointer. I've got a mixing tray here. This is great for gouache. One of the nice things about gouache is if you use a tray like this and that paint dries in these little scoops, you can reactivate it with some water. So that's nice. And then obviously a piece of scrap paper right here just to do a couple swatches to show you what gouache can do. So the thing about gouache is you need to water it down a little bit. So I also have some water right here that I'm going to use. And we're going to start by squeezing a little bit of paint into each of our little scoops here. So let's start with red. And I'm not doing a lot today, so I'm just using a very little amount. I'm going to do a little blue. And then a little yellow. Make sure you put the caps on good because they do dry out if the caps are not on. Okay. So each one of these is going to require a different amount of water. So you can't use gouache right out of the tube. It's too thick. So we're really looking for the brushability. So how we put it on the paper so that it leaves a nice matte opaque swatch. So each one of these is going to require a little bit different amount of water. So go ahead and dip your brush in there and start mixing it. I know from experience the red does not need a lot of water just because it's pretty watered down already, as opposed to white, which tends to be very dense and needs quite a bit more water. So I think this is probably a good spot for the gouache. I think if I had to say what kind of consistency it would be, it's probably somewhere along the lines of a heavy whipping cream. So that looks pretty good. One thing about the water is you can see that when I put the red in there, it really affects the water. So be careful. You don't want to pigment accidentally your colors. So I'm going to work with each one of these individually. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to brush this on. So what I like to do is grab load up my brush and go ahead and start painting on there, get a bunch. And then I typically utilize the side of my brush to kind of go ahead and even it out a bit. So, and you can see from this, it's not evened out at all, but try not to overwork it with the brush, because what happens there is that if you overwork it with the brush, then you can't see the brush strokes that way. So as this dries, it's going to even out. It's going to present very matte, and you should not be able to see the paper color through there. One big thing about gouache is that as it dries, it appears very differently from when it's wet. So we'll see how that looks when it starts to dry. So let me go ahead and do a little bit of the blue. I'm actually going to switch brushes now so that I don't pollute my blue here. And then again, based on experience, I know that the blue does need a little bit more water than the red. And again, every brand is different. The brand that we're using, the Winsor Newton, we use consistently in this class, and so I know how it works. But different brands require more, sometimes it requires less amount of water. So play around with that and see what you think. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of do the same thing. Loaded up my brush, and then just try to use the flat side to smooth it out a little bit, okay? And then our last one here is going to be the yellow. Same thing, adding some water there, being careful not to pollute my color with the blue or the red. Notice when I put my brushes in the water, I haven't shaken it out yet because I don't want the water to get pigmented. All right, so one more time. I've got my yellow, same idea. Load up your brush. Try to utilize the sides of your brush. And as you can see how these are drying, the red obviously is a little drier than the other ones. The color does change a little bit, so just be mindful of that, okay? Practice this, see what you think before you jump into the color wheel.